Good afternoon. It is a real honor to be here as a UNESCO-Chair celebrating the creation of another UNESCO-Chair. And I'd like to first congratulate Professor Benno Verlen for this extraordinary achievement and congratulate all of you to be here to celebrate this moment in Jena as well as in the life career of Professor Benno Verlen. I think that we are now creating a lot of expectations in the work of a UNESCO chair, and it should be, because UNESCO gives tremendous visibility to the work that UNESCO chairs do, and because the way in which the UNESCO chair works are a network that creates different levels of communication among different universities. Therefore, I'm very grateful to Professor Verlen and to Friedrich Schiller University Jena for the invitation to provide this keynote. I will address global understanding for sustainability in light of global citizenship education. I will explore some key concepts from the epistemology of the South and key concepts from the epistemology of the North, while trying to retain principles associated to the logic and promise of the Enlightenment. Let me start with the epistemology of the South, and this is a statement from Pedagogy of the Press from Paulo Freire, who was a dear friend of mine, and I worked with him when he was Secretary of Education in the Municipality of Sao Paulo. He says, whereas the violence of the oppressors prevent the oppressed from being fully human, the response of the latter to this violence is grounded in the desire to pursue the right to be human. As the oppressors dehumanize others and violate their rights, they themselves also become dehumanized. As the oppressed, fighting to be human, take away the oppressive power to dominate and suppress, they restore to the oppressors the humanity they had lost in the exercise of oppression. It is only the oppressed who, by freeing themselves, can free their oppressors. The latter, as an oppressive class, can free neither others nor themselves. You don't believe how important it is for me to be saying this in Jena, because when I was a young student, one of the thinkers that caught my imagination was Hegel, who talked in Jena. So I've been thinking about this university since I was 18, and I said to myself, I wish one day I could visit Jena, and I'm now given this opportunity to provide a keynote, so I'm really honored. Now, let me offer you some elements from the political anthropology of Freire. I'm finishing now a book, 275,000 words, on the Wiley Handbook on Freire, and there is one chapter with a colleague of mine, Morrow. And this chapter offers an analysis of the key theses of Freire's, which will exemplify the arguments. Freire's emphasis on process of dehumanization, humanization, invites to the awareness of such humanizing possibilities, giving rise to moral obligations that education constitutes a distinctive human vocation. The second thesis is that humanization is constructed in part through struggles of oppression liberation, whose intersubjective logic can be understood metaphorically in terms of Hegel's allegory of recognition in the master-slave dialectics and the principle that no one can be free until all are free. The third thesis, that the necessary condition of possibility of humanization as a struggle for mutual recognition is a dialogical and developmental subject whose self-understanding is constituted through mutual recognition and a dialectic of being and becoming that can flourish only under conditions of relative non-oppression that release the potential of biophilia and reduce its pathological distortion as necrophilia in relation to both society and nature. So, what are the implications of these arguments? Another of my favorite thinkers is Jürgen Habermas. And for Freire, as well as for Habermas, there is an ethical dimension that can be articulated and debated communicatively, given the human capacity for moral reasoning and reflection. I think at this point, I would like to speak of the possible ethics of our global system, and I will use the work of another great thinker from the South, Enrique Dussel. Dussel, a Latin American philosopher, theologian, and historian, is inviting us to transcend the postmodernist debate from the ethical and historical standpoint of the oppressed and excluded populations, primarily those of the Global South. Obviously, what we have here is a great challenge, because Dussel himself challenges Eurocentric modernism with its pretension of universality and sees modernity as connected intimately with colonialism, but also challenges the relativism of postmodernism, which rejects the idea of a universal ethics. So what do we do in the context of all these dilemmas? Let me say first that coming from a tradition of critical theory, I assume at the outset that it's impossible to fully dissociate the normative from the analytical in the construction of scientific thought. Hence, the importance of a notion of the good life, guiding the intellectual, theoretical, meta-theoretical, and empirical exploration of reality. We all know that for some thinkers, reality is a social construction. But I will argue from a critical theory perspective that not each social construction has the same quality in terms of the empirical proof, the logic, the methodology, in terms of the sounding theory underneath this empirical argument. But the other element that I would like to suggest is that we need a new global ethics as a way to challenge the intrinsic moral indifference of markets. Moreover, we need a new global ethics that may help understand the good life as a successful life. I would say a word or two on this front. The next slide offers you some arguments from the Epistemology of the North. Recently, the Economist Intelligence Unit contacted me to help them design the Global Youth Index measure. What does the Global Youth Index measure? The Global Youth measures the extent to which youth are prepared to participate in the global transition to a knowledge economy. This is the economist's position. With the future economy predicated on the ability to utilize information, youth education and training must include 21st century skills, such as problem solving, adaptability, and leadership, along with digital skills within an environment that fosters creativity and innovation. For youth to contribute to and thrive during this transition, youth must be actively engaged and involved in the global community through both economic and civil participation. This requires a future-focused education, an active youth community, supportive policies that target youth, and the provision of economic opportunity. So here you have, in this epistemology of the South, the domains, the 5 domains in which they are creating this index: education and skills, employment and employability, innovation and entrepreneurship, global citizenship, enable economic environment. I found the idea quite fascinating because these are economists trying to create an index, and they include the global citizenship, and that matters a great deal. Now, I must confess that this slide has caused me some trouble, because Michael Hayden was the director of the CIA, and also he was the director of the National Agency for Security. And he wrote this article defending the Enlightenment in the post-truth age. These 2 sentences are from him. The first one, it says, intelligent work. I believe this room is full of intelligent people, but not necessarily we do intelligent work. I'm not so sure how intelligent he is, but he does intelligent work. And he says, intelligent work, at least as practiced in the Western liberal tradition, reflect distributed enlightenment values, gathering, evaluating, and analyzing information, and then disseminating conclusions for use, study, or refutation. How the erosion of enlightenment values threatens good intelligence was obvious in the Trump administration, ill-conceived and poorly executed order that looked at the world like a Muslim ban. So it's interesting because he identified the post-truth age, which was identified as the word of the year 2016 by the Oxford in dictionary, because post-truth meaning that the question is not so much the quality of the argument, but whether we can appeal to emotions, because people tend to follow their emotions more than rationality. So I found myself fascinated by this argument. Let me go to a second part of my presentation in which I will take the liberty to propose 12 different elements that should constitute this amalgam of a new global ethics. First, the ethics of caring. Global citizenship education should promote an ethics of caring, or what Science term cura personalis. The care for the individual person and human rights remain a central characteristic of global citizenship education. A global ethics of caring is central to the implementation of global citizenship education, embracing as well a key concept from feminist theory. An ethics frame in a social justice education paradigm in the post-truth age. Without bare essentials, we cannot fully accomplish citizenship. Bare essentials speaks of economic citizenship, including the right to a job, education, healthcare, affordable housing, and learning over the course of a lifetime. Global citizenship cannot substitute for national citizenship, but has to add value to local, national, and regional citizenship. So, is that my impression? Yes. The next question is the global ethic of understanding, embracing hybridity and diversity. I think we have now a central concept which I have discussed just a day or two ago in Taiwan. We were giving lectures to teachers, and a teacher stood up and said, wait a second, how could we teach citizenship to children in Taiwan who want to be Korean? And her argument was quite solid. She said, our children and our youth are practicing the Korean hip-hop. For them, the hip-hop that is being involving now the youth in Asia, which has this Korean center element, is substantial. But the hip-hop started in the Bronx 60, 70 years ago. So this hybridity and diversity should be substantial part of the constitution of an ethics. A global ethics of learning is substantial. One of my great concerns about the internet is not that it offers a cornucopia of knowledge, but it offers knowledge that we don't know what are the principles of authority behind that knowledge. At least some of us here who work in universities, we have to go over several hubs. But at this moment, I'm not so sure how we can qualify the arguments that we find in the internet so easily. The next one is the question of intersectionality of the global and the local. We live in a moment in which actions that took place thousands of miles away from our domiciles are transforming our local condition, while our local condition and the changes are also transforming the global condition. It's that intersectionality that we need to understand. Then a global ethics based on global consciousness, and this global consciousness have to be considered in the bedrock of the human rights regime and universal values of sustainability. A global ethics for the youth bulge and social wage models. We are going to face a jobless society in the future. the youth is facing tremendous pressure in trying to figure out how to adapt with the future robotics employment. I see no other solution but the social wage model, which entails a serious redistribution of income in each society. So here, I want to finish because the time is going very fast. We know that we cannot stop time. And truly, the only thing I will truly have is time. An ethics of belonging to a global world and individual responsibility. It is not about me. There is research that I enjoy very much by two psychologists, Adam Grant and David Hoffman. They decided to go into the hospitals. You know, hospitals are places where we go when we have to be looking after when we are having some problems. But hospitals are also a reservoir of bacteria, viruses, etc., who have survived all the possible ways of hygiene. So the people working in hospitals are advised to wash their hands very, very well when they go to the bathroom. So what they did, they put two different sets of principles in the bathroom. For a while, these terms, hand hygiene, prevents you from catching diseases. These are experts in not catching diseases, nurses, doctors, etc. So that worked for a while, right? Then they changed and put hand hygiene prevents patients from catching diseases. And then they measure the amount of soap that was used in the bathroom. The amount of soap when the second statement was there was double than the first time. So they wash much more their hands, thinking of their patients, they're thinking of themselves. So it's not only about me. So let me finish with few comments. The first one is that there is a tension between growth and sustainability, and we know that this has to do with the presence of a model of development based on extracting fuel, fossils, etc. But there is also a tension between democracy and human rights. We cannot kid ourselves. Democracy is an important word, but it has been diminishing its importance in the world today. Human rights is very important, but there are a number of countries in the world that will not accept human rights beyond as a generic statement. So what we need to do is to really move into an analysis of how we can create a dialogue between planet, peace, and people. So let me go into that part of this presentation very briefly. Invariably, citizenship education is related to ethics and morality, and the politics of culture and official knowledge of the nation-state responsible for public education. Global citizenship education is different because it plays a role in the global system and does not depend on the politics of a particular nation-state. With the impetus of the concept, it should not be a surprise that it's already playing a major role in building the seeds of a new ethics in the world system. So, what are the theses that I like to defend? The first one is that global commons is defined by three basic propositions. The first one is that our planet is our only home, and we have to protect it through a global citizenship, sustainable development, education, and global understanding. Secondly, the global commons is predicated on the idea that global peace is an intangible cultural good of humanity with immaterial value. Global peace is a treasure of humanity. Thirdly, global commons is predicated on the need to find ways that people who should be considered all equal manage to live together democratically in a very ever-growing, diverse world, seeking to fulfill their individual and cultural interests and achieving their inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Psychology 157 is termed Psychology of the Good Life in Yale. It's taught by a psychology professor by the name of Laurie Santos. It's the most popular class in the history of Yale. It was inaugurated last semester. When she put the syllabus, 1/4 of the undergraduates at Yale enrolled, and in the second class, another quarter. Half of the undergraduates of Yale enrolled in this course. Then they renamed the course, and it reached the science of well-being and happiness. I believe that all of us want to be happy. I believe that all of us want to have a good well-being. The question is, can science help that? My sense is that we may be facing serious challenges in the future. The first one is whether sustainability will need a new social contract to avoid the challenge that growth could be checked by sustainability. The second, whether global citizenship education is a new social contract. And if it's a new social contract, we have to figure out why we are living in a neo-democracy that matches neoliberalism. British legal scholar Conor Gertie called neo-democracy a partner of neoliberalism, a system in which liberty is enjoyed by the few and security in its fullest sense is available only to the elite, but within a system of more general formal rights. Or, if I may see, my colleague Carol Patman, democratic paradox. She said, and I quote, "Democracy is more popular than ever before, but the conditions under which all citizens can enjoy the standing of full membership in the polity is under serious threat." So let me finish with two of my favorite sentences. The one from Mark Twain that I remember once in a while, because it's important in this civilization race. And I quote, "Our civilization is a civilization which has destroyed the simplicity and repose of life, replaced its contentment, its poetry, its soft romance, dreams, and vision with the money fever, sordid ideals, vulgar ambitions, and the sleep which does not refresh." And then the famous statement by H.G. Wells, "Civilization is a race between education and catastrophe." Let us learn the truth and spread it as far and wide as our circumstances allow. For the truth is the greatest weapon we have. My sense is that we have to ask the question, what kind of education? I don't think it should be the banking education that has been criticized by Paulo Freire, but an education borrowing for Wilhelm von Humboldt that should be conceived as laying out a string along which learners proceed in their own ways, exercising and improving their creative capacities and imagination, and experiencing the joy of discovery. Thank you very much.